Okay, people, this is a doozy of a case. Mom and dad doesn't get along. Mom sent the police over to dad's house for a welfare check. When the police got there, they couldn't believe their eyes. One of the most disgusting homes you want to see with your own two eyes. The stove was disgusting. All of the rooms were disgusting. There were no clean dishes in the sink. Now the cops took pictures of everything that they saw, and now dad need to clear his name. So let's sit back and see how this case plays itself out. Please subscribe and like this video.
This is a hearing on the extension of a temporary restraining order that was issued ex parte. And Mr. Hawley, I believe you were the moving party on the obtaining of that restraining order. So you wish to make an opening statement?
I do, Judge.
Is the rule requested?
Judge, rule is requested.
Rule has been requested, so anyone who is going to be a witness in this case must go outside of the courtroom and remain outside of the courtroom until you're called to testify. You are not to discuss the testimony of any other witness with anyone until such time as you have testified. Counsel are under a continuing duty to ensure that the rule is complied with. Now, you now make an opening statement.
Yes, sir. Judge, this is a complaint to establish period. It's been going on for some time. I looked through the file last night since 2021. I think we need to get, at the end of the day, at least a date that maybe we can have a final hearing. The situation is I represent Brittany Tressler. Mr. Gervin has filed this action and requested that his parental rights be established, which they have been. The parties had a temporary hearing back at that time when it originally was filed in front of Judge Lockhart Mash. I was not a part of that with Ms. Tressler. She represented herself. I believe Ms. Hassel represented Mr. Gervin at that time. And there's a temporary parenting plan in place that the parties have kind of been going by. We've had a few issues here and there, and some motions have been filed, and there's some other temporary orders. One that's important in this case, which is in March of last year, was that Mr. Gervin would not allow Elena to be in the presence of his brother. There was some significant psychological issues with the brother and those types of things, and that was pretty well done, I believe, by agreement in an order. I've showed that to his now counsel, and that's part of what the court will see in this hearing. This thing culminated in Ms. Tressler having some concerns about what was going on with the visitation on an afternoon. She was talking with her child and called for a welfare check. Officer Moss, who has left the courtroom, will be testifying. We'll call him first. He works nights and he's with the city, so he needs to get out of here. He's going to testify that he went over there, that the brother was the only one over there, that he was supposed to be babysitting Elena for quite a period of time. The house was a wreck. I've attached the photographs that the officers and he took that were basically just of a apartment that wouldn't be fit for Manor Beach to live in, to be polite about it. And you can hear from him about what he thought about the apartment when he was walking around and things of that nature. The officer Lashley, that is going to be the next witness, will testify that when he went to go serve the temporary restraining order on Mr. Gervin, that the apartment looked a little worse than what the photographs showed to the court today, and how they went about with getting the summons signed. And when he left, basically he had to clean off his uniform, and he's going to testify to all of that. This is not a place that a child should be in. And I know he's got some pictures today that will show that he's cleaned up a little bit. Our position is this has been a cyclical situation with Mr. Gervin throughout this entire time, and he's kind of at a low point now. This child needs some protection specifically, for right now. So when the court's ready and after the opening statements, I'll call Officer Moss.
Judge, as you know, I don't have the benefit of being Mr. Gervin's lawyer throughout the pendency of this litigation. I'm here today just filling in for Mr. Barnhill, who's sick with the flu. With that said, Your Honor, Mr. Hawley's right. The proof is going to show today that Mr. Gervin has some pictures for the court, the exact same pictures that were taken by the officer that entered his apartment that night, that shows a completely different living situation. It shows a cleaned up environment, although not perfect, substantially better than what the pictures allege. Judge, I would argue that the motion itself, coupled with the first exhibit, which is the report from the officer, it makes it sound as though Mr. Gervin is living in something I would describe as an AE's newest episode of Hoarders. And it's really not that bad, Your Honor. It's not great. It's not perfect. But I would argue that against Mr. Hawley's assertion that this is not a place fit for a child to be, Your Honor, I think the proof will show that. They seem to think that maybe this is a continuing problem. Maybe there's evidence that it's been like this before. I don't know. Like I said, I'm just here filling in today. But without that showing, Judge, I don't think that continuing this restraining order based on these pictures that have now been kind of resolved would be appropriate. Now, Mr. Hawley has argued that protection of this child is necessary, and I think this leads to an important point, Judge. In the motion itself, Mr. Hawley has argued that this is the appropriate venue for this action, and Judge, I would disagree. They have essentially raised allegations of dependency and neglect. Now, they haven't called them DNA allegations, but they've essentially alleged that the condition that the child was in such state of squalor that it poses a substantial risk of safety to the child. Judge, that is straight up an allegation of dependency and neglect. And I believe that action should have been filed in the juvenile court, which has exclusive and original jurisdiction for DNA matters. Judge, if the court's not inclined to transfer the action or find that the venue is not appropriate and we continue with this hearing, I would argue that the allegations made are now moot based on the conditions of the apartment. I think the motion itself was twofold, if I remember correctly. Temporary restraining order based on two things: a lack of employment and bad living conditions. The proof is going to show today that none of those exist. Those have now been corrected. I would ask that Your Honor set aside the restraining order and allow the parties to continue down the path of setting this thing for a final hearing.
Well, let me first address the issue of your argument that the allegations sound in dependency and neglect, and therefore your argument that this should properly have been brought in juvenile court. Once this court has concurrent jurisdiction over matters of paternity actions that are filed, they can file it in juvenile court or they can file it here. Mr. Gervin availed himself of this court's jurisdiction by filing he filed the petition to establish paternity. So he brought the matter in before the court instead of going into juvenile court. Secondly, once the matter is before the court, this court has the jurisdiction over the best interest of the minor child. Every time that there's something that could rise to the level of a dependency and neglect petition in juvenile court that's raised in a divorce court, custody case, or anything else, which happens routinely, if I then have to transfer it to juvenile court, our whole system will become unworkable. Therefore, this court finds that we have jurisdiction over the matter before us, and that the best interest of the minor child, which is the preeminent consideration of this court in any custody case, will allow the court to consider the evidence even if it rises to the level of what could have been brought in juvenile court as dependency and neglect. For that reason, any oral motion that I would consider to have been made to transfer this to juvenile court is respectfully denied. We will proceed with the hearing on the temporary restraining order. Mr. Hawley, you may call your first witness.
Joel Moss, Your Honor. Can you state your full name for the court, please, sir?
Officer Joel Moss with the Dixon Police Department.
And how long have you been with the city of Dixon now? I can't remember.
A little over a year and a half now.
Okay. And how long have you been in law enforcement totally?
To include corrections time, a little over 6 years, 6.5 years, I'm sorry.
All right. And especially during your last year and a half with the city of Dixon, have you had an opportunity to go on calls such as this one where you go out to people's houses and try to resolve situations that are domestic in nature?
On a daily basis, sir.
Okay. And would you say you've had a lot of experience in those types of calls at this point?
Yes, sir.
Okay. On January the 27th and you put in here 2023 in your report, that should be 2024, correct?
Yes, sir. I apologize. That was a typo. I'll fix that.
Okay. On January 27th of this year, 2024, did you have an opportunity to go to the home of Mr. Robert Allen Gervin?
Yes, sir.
And it says here in your report that was around 1,850 hours. What time would that be?
That'd be around 6:50.
Okay. And that was at 9311 Magnum Drive, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And whereabouts in the city of Dixon is that?
Apartment complex down off of Beasley Drive in
All right.
Cowan.
And Officer Moss, I'm going to give you the floor at this point. Can you describe to the court, from basically start to finish, when you got there, what happened? Who did you see? Who did you talk to? And what condition did you find his apartment?
I would need to see my report to reference his exact name, but we got to the apartment. The uncle was there watching the kids, and per dispatch, they had a order saying that he wasn't supposed to have any contact with the kids. And from what he told me, the father left the kid, or the child, I should say, with the uncle due to wanting to go out and make money.
So I can give you the report out of counsel, I will do that if you need it, but it was John Gervin, was that the name of the uncle?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And at the time that you got there and you're talking about having to go make money, what was the purpose of him having to make money on that day?
He said he wanted to go, or the father wanted to go out, do DoorDash deliveries so he could get the daughter some spaghetti.
Okay. Was there references that he didn't have money for food at that time?
Yes.
Tell the court then, continue on. What condition did you find the apartment when you were talking to Mr. John Gervin at that time?
Okay, so when we walked in, Mr. Gervin had the stove on because he said his hands were cold and he was trying to heat up the apartment to warm up, and also uses the stove to light his cigarettes. It was probably one of the most disgusting apartments I have been into in my law enforcement career. There was trash piled up, probably about close to approximately 4.5, 5 feet high in the closet. There was the stove had trash all over it and dirt all over the stove, which I did include in my pictures. And also, it could be, if you need to see body cam would show just how disgusting it was. There were bugs coming out of coffee mugs.
I'm sorry, bugs coming out of coffee mugs?
Yes.
Okay.
There was a thing of ice cream on the counter that was melted and just sitting on the counter. The daughter's room was trashed. There was trash all over the apartment. And it was definitely unfit for having a child in that apartment based on what the conditions were. And I did make a DCS referral based on my observations.
Okay. Have you heard back from that DCS referral? Have they contacted you in any manner?
No.
Okay. I want to show you some photographs. Some more, we'll hand those to you. Ask you if you recognize those photographs as the pictures you took on that day.
Yes, I do.
Can you pick a couple of those out and describe those for the court as to what you saw and why you took a photograph of these types of scenes in the apartment?
Well, I wanted to document just what we saw. So on this first one, you can see the stove, and also there wasn't a single clean dish anywhere in that apartment. They opened cabinets up and there weren't anything clean. So you can see on the stove is dirty pot, pans. The photo's lousy print, but all the markings on there was just dirt all over that stove. So this one, that was the just showing all the dirty dishes. Trash piled sky high in the apartment. Trash piled sky high. And we talked to Mr. Gervin about it, and I told him, why don't you clean this place up? And he said, well, it's due to a snowstorm, but that's A, week prior, and B, there's a dumpster right there in the apartment complex they can just take trash right down to.
How far away was the dumpster from the apartment, would you say?
It'd be walking distance. I couldn't give an exact distance how far it is from it, but easy to walk to.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
So more trash showing on the counters. So this one just showed the limited amount of food that was in the cabinet and how there was a thing of cereal and that was it in the cabinet. So it's very limited on food. And the daughter had told me that she had a pizza and a Dr. Pepper, and that was all she had.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Judge, I objected to hearsay.
May I respond?
Yes.
Judge, I would first off say this is an 80325 exception to statements, especially if this officer who's set forth the foundation of his ability to recognize these types of things. That's a statement made in a complaint to establish period as a chancery court proceeding about abuse and neglect, of a minor child in this situation.
Overruled.
You can go ahead. Go ahead and finish with your explanation.
Yes, sir. So when we asked her what she had to eat that day, she said some old pizza and she had a Dr. Pepper and that was all she had to drink. They didn't have any bottled water and apparently she doesn't get water from the sink. So that was all she had that day was one Dr. Pepper.
Excuse me, officer. Are these the same photographs he's referencing that are in the color photographs that you had attached to your motion?
They should be, Judge. When I got these from the city of Dixon, they sent the color ones over and I didn't get any other color ones. So I've got the black and white ones.
You want to utilize those? I notice his are black and white. It may be helpful.
Yes, sir. I was planning on moving those into the evidence instead of these that he's got in his hands.
Show those, officer, to opposing counsel before we go any further.
Thank you, Your Honor.
No problem. I just think it black and white is a little bit harder to see the details. So go ahead.
Yes, sir. So on this one now, if you can see on the color photo, you can see clearly how much dirt there was on that stove and how it appears it wasn't cleaned in a long period of time. In this one, you can see that container of ice cream that I mentioned that was melted ice cream just sitting on the counter. And this was that trash pile that I was discussing and how high the trash was piled up in the cabinet. Further one showing trash on the counter. Again, they're saying they didn't have money for food, but you can see the empty beer containers and cigarettes on the counter where if that money was spent on food for a child versus on alcohol.
Yes, sir.
This one picture shows the trash on the counter and then the very little food that was in that cabinet and nothing fit for a child to consume for a day. This was her bedroom showing just the amount of trash on the floor in the bedroom. And I had to step around everything to be able to even get in that room. You couldn't see the floor due to the amount of trash. Further trash on the floor in her room. And this one, I want to show the garbage bag just sitting there in the bedroom versus being taken out to a dumpster and more trash on the floor.
You said that was in the bedroom?
Yes.
Oh.
Again, a little bit more detail of how much trash was in that bedroom. So this one show more empty cigarette containers and stuff like that on the just by the TV versus in a trash bag. And with cigarettes, they're easy for her to have been able to get to, and if she'd grabbed one of those, it could be very unhealthy for a child for around all that cigarette smoke. Bedroom, the adult bedroom in the apartment showing how much trash was on the floor in his bedroom. And also slightly cleaner than the child's bedroom where he lived versus where his child lives, which I found that wasn't too conducive to a child. And this one just showing all the cigarette butts and everything else out on the balcony of the apartment.
Does that look like a planter, like for a plant? Is that how you found that?
Yes.
And would you say that's nearly full of just cigarette butts?
Yes. And then empty containers of soda and other trash all piled around it.
Okay. Judge, I would introduce that as collective one to the court.
Collective one.
All right, Officer Moss. So, did Robert Allen Gervin eventually show up at the apartment?
Yes, sir.
And your discussions with Mr. Gervin, where did he tell you that actually he had been? Well, what was his reasoning as to why he wasn't there?
He said he was out door dashing because he didn't have a job, so he was trying to get money for his daughter, or to buy spaghetti for his daughter because he said she wanted spaghetti for dinner.
Okay. Was there anything else that was said between you and Mr. Robert Allen Gervin that was concerning at all?
Well, he told me how he has had brain cancer and was a veteran, so I tried to give him some pointers on where he could go to, including the VA helpline to be able to get help. I also tried to tell him that he needed to clean his apartment up for her and then take pictures so that way he could show the court that it was cleaned up, which I don't know if he's done or not. I'm not privy to that, but so I tried to give him some pointers on what he needed to do to clean up his act.
Okay. And when you were out there, what other officers were there with you?
Sergeant Rapogel and also Patrolman Lefevre.
Okay. And is there any question at all that, when you showed up, that was John Gervin that was watching Elena?
Not all, we got his ID.
Okay. So at the end of the day here, Officer Moss, how did you leave the situation with Elena apparently there at the apartment? Did she get to stay there? Did you make her go somewhere else?
No.
What did y'all do?
Based on the safety for Elena, we called her mom. Her mom responded to the apartment, and we brought her out to her mom. And she was crying as we brought her out because she clearly loves her dad, but we couldn't leave the child in those conditions.
Very well. All right, that's all I have, Judge.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
cross-examine.
One moment, Judge. I didn't catch your last name when you first took the stand. Is it Moss?
Yes, sir.
Can you spell that for me?
MOSS.
And you've been with the Dixon Police Department for a year and a half? Is that your
Approximately.
testimony? What was the reason for going over to Mr. Gervin's apartment that night?
We were dispatched because Lena's mother called saying that Mr. Gervin's uncle, who she said had a no contact order with her child, was watching her child due to text messages she received, and she wanted to check on the status of her child.
So it was a welfare check on the child?
Yes.
At what point in your interaction on this night, which I'm sorry, did you say it was January 24th or 27th?
27th.
Friday, January 27th?
I'd have to look on the calendar, but I'm pretty sure that'd be a Friday, yes.
At what point, when you showed up to Mr. Gervin's apartment, were your concerns about the welfare of the child?
The minute we walked in.
Well, hold on a second. Were they alleviated on the report from the mom?
Based on what the mom said, we responded, but we always keep an open mind because we get calls all the time, so we have to go in and investigate for ourselves. So when I got there, the second we saw the inside of that apartment, we had major concerns for the welfare of the child. Regardless of any of the court orders on who can watch a child or not, it was just based on the conditions of the apartment where brought up our primary concerns.
Okay. What all did you search when you got in the house?
I didn't search anything in the house. We asked him if we can see if there was food because all the trash on the floor, all the garbage around the apartment that was in plain view from the second we walked in. And we asked him to open the cabinet to show us if there was food or not. So he opened the cabinet, and he also opened the fridge, and there was none, minus those few items I took a picture of.
So you searched the cabinets and the fridge and in general, just the apartment itself as a whole?
I didn't search it. We just walked around the apartment, just seeing what the conditions were. It wasn't
You
a
asked him to open the
search.
cabinets, right? So you could look inside.
Yes, and he complied. Because again, we were trying to check on the welfare of the child.
Would you call that a search by consent?
Yes. Yes. We asked him if we could see, and he said yes.
And I noticed there wasn't a picture of the contents of the fridge. What was in the fridge?
A beer.
Okay.
There was no food in there for a child, so I didn't even bother taking pictures in the inside.
At any point during your interaction with Mr. John Gervin or Mr. Robert Gervin, did you come to find out when the beer had been purchased?
No, we didn't.
Okay. So is it possible that the beer that you found on the counter that you testified to under direct, I think you said something about maybe their money should have been spent on food, not beer. You don't know when that was purchased, do you?
No, I don't, but he said he was thirsty that morning, so he pulled a beer out to have a drink.
And was that Robert that said that? Or do you recall?
John's the brother. Your client's Robert, right?
Yes.
Okay, then it'd be John. But regardless, if you're struggling with money, there are things that you can look at that are priorities over alcohol and cigarettes.
Well, now who's struggling with money, Robert or John?
Both of them.
Okay. Who's spending money on beer and cigarettes?
I don't know which one.
Answers my question. At what point in the interaction did you give Mr. Robert Gervin tips on how to, I think as you put it, clean up his act?
When we started talking to him when he got to the apartment,
Okay. Is this before or after the child left with the mom?
before and after.
Wait 1 second, Judge. I'd like to show you some pictures, officer, if I may. And Your Honor, I'm happy to show these to opposing counsel. I've showed them to him in discussions
All right.
earlier before we started the hearing. Officer Moss, I'm just going to hand you my iPad.
All right, that's a black and white of the stove.
Is this the picture you took that you testified to earlier?
Is that the one from my report?
You tell me?
It looks similar, but I'm not 100% positive if you took that out of my report or not. So, as it's just a picture on your iPad.
Do you see anything in the corner of that photo here? Any stamp of any kind?
It says filed February. Yes, then.
So this is the picture that was.
Judge, I would object as far as the stamp of anything and him trying to authenticate it. Obviously, Officer Moss didn't make that stamp, so he has no way to testify to
Officer
it.
can't authenticate the photographs. He can testify as to what they reflect. Obviously, the photographs will speak for themselves, but as far as the officer, he didn't take the photographs, if I understand correctly, so therefore he can only observe what's shown in the photograph. He cannot
And
authenticate.
I'm not trying to
And Judge-
get through this witness warning into the depth.
I would also have an objection as to the relevance here. Officer Moss was there on that date. He took photographs on that date. Now, I understand these are photographs where Mr. Gervin's attempted to clean up the apartment somewhat, but he has no knowledge of any of this. And it would be up to Mr. Gervin really to authenticate every one of these photographs. And I don't think it would be relevant for Mr. Moss to go through all of these to explain photographs of what Mr. Gervin has done after the fact. He has no knowledge of it.
Like I said, I'm not trying to authenticate this witness. I'm not trying to enter into evidence of this witness. But opposing counsel has opened the door to this issue by testifying not only to the pictures on direct examination, but this officer specifically gave my client instruction to clean the apartment. I'm just trying to show him the result of that so I can have some follow-up questions on it.
But at the same time, we don't know when these photographs were taken. At this point, we have absolutely no idea who took them, when they were taken. Officer Moss can't testify to any of that as to whether it was subsequent or prior to his photographs.
I think we're losing sight of the fact that Officer Moss is not the one who's going to be making the decision in this case. And therefore, it's not relevant, no offense intended, whether he thinks that the apartment has been cleaned up appropriately or not. That falls to me to have that decision. So I'm going to sustain the objection because I don't think it's relevant to have him go through your photographs and say, oh, I think he's done a good job. He's testified what the conditions were. He's testified the advice he gave. The question of whether or not your client has followed the advice or not is a question that I have to determine, not this officer.
Yes, Judge. So we'll just ask it this way. Officer, the advice you gave Mr. Gervin to clean the apartment, suppose it's hypothetical. Each and every picture that you have in front of you, each and every picture that you took that shows the condition of the apartment as it existed that day you were there. Let's assume for purposes of this hypothetical, none of the trash is on the counters.
There's still trash all over the floors, though.
Let me finish. There's no trash on the counters. There's no trash on the floor. There's no piles, sky high, as you called it, of cardboard trash in no entryway or closet or whatever that was. No trash on the floors. No trash on the stove. The stove has been cleaned of all the burnt food and gook that you testified to earlier. Had the apartment looked that way as I've just described it in the hypothetical to you, would you have been concerned?
Again, Judge, I renew my same objection, and it goes to the heart of what the court just said. It's not up to the officer here to give his opinion as to the condition of the house and what that would relieve of his suggestion of what he suggested. This is something for Mr. Gervin and his lawyer to take up at that time. I don't think it's relevant, anything that Officer Moss would say at this point, and it's based on speculation.
Judge, it's a hypothetical. I'm having a hard time understanding why it's not relevant. If he's testified that the condition of the apartment when he got there caused so much concern that he had to initiate a DCM.
What you're asking the officer to say is that with the conditions that were there, he found it to be unacceptable. If those conditions were not there, would he have found it acceptable?
That's exactly what I'm asking.
That's a simple yes or no question. Was that true? If all of those bad conditions weren't there, would you have had any issue with the apartment?
With the apartment itself, no.
Thank you, officer. Mr. Hawley asked you on direct examination, who were the officers that arrived on scene with you that night? I heard you say Patrol Officer Lefevre.
Yes, sir.
And then you said Sergeant, and I didn't catch the last name.
Rapolgo.
Can you spell that? Maybe?
Your Honor, can I pull my phone out and pull up the spelling?
You may.
Please, the court, it's in the report that's attached to the motion that I think everybody has as well.
It's
I'm just a filler. I don't have the actual file with me. So.
It's Reprogal. First name Sierra.
Reprogal. R-A-P-R-O-G-A-L.
Reprogal.
Thank you, officer. You testified earlier that you have body cams at Dixon Police Department. Is that right?
Yes, sir. It's right here on my vest.
Have you reviewed any of that body cam footage in preparation of your testimony today?
No, sir.
Do you know if your body cam was operational that night?
Yes, sir. All of them were.
Has that footage been preserved to the best of your knowledge?
Every single body cam video we have gets uploaded onto the system and stays on it.
How long were you at Mr. Gervin's apartment in total? From the time you arrived, I think you said roughly about 6:50 to the time you left.
I would have to see the CAD report to see what dispatch said the time was that we cleared the call, so I don't know.
Can you give me an approximation as to what time the mother showed up to get the child?
Again, I'd have to see dispatch CAD report to where it was documented, so no, I can't.
How was the child reacting when she learned she was going back with mom?
She cried.
Did she say anything?
I don't remember.
you recall how long mom was present on scene?
Long enough for us to check her ID and ensure that she was who she was. Talked to her, give her advice because she asked me some questions and we answered them. And then she took the child home.
One second, Judge.
I look at the police report that was filed with the motion. I'm
After this witness.
Mr. Holly, redirect.
The court's inclined, may I look at the police report that was filed with the motion? I'm going to work on, I know opposing counsel referenced that. I'm going to ask him to maybe authenticate what he's got there and enter that into evidence. What's in there? And that back to him. I will get the. Is there any objection? I'll just enter it in, we'll let him go. Okay. So boss, I'm gonna hand you a document and ask you if you recognize that document as your report.
Yes, sir.
And this is a report that you entered into the city of Dixon based on your communications with the Gervin and at their apartment on that January 27th, 2024 day, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the only issue with the report, you can look through it, but we've already established it should be 2024. And that would be a change, but is there anything else that you would recant or add to in your report?
No, sir.
I would move that in as exhibit number 2, Judge.
Objection, Judge.
No objection being made. Typically, police reports are hearsay and are not admissible, but with the consent of both parties will allow it to be introduced.
That's all I have.
Any recross? Thank you, sir. You may step down. We're releasing you from your subpoena so you can go get some sleep before your
Yes,
work
sir.
tonight. Mr. Holly, you may call your next witness.
Judge, before we get there, my client needs to use the restroom. Can he take a brief recess to go do
He
that?
needs to go to the
That looks like what he's doing. He buckled up. Do you want me to go ahead and call Ms. Tressler? We can move on, and then it looks like he may be headed this way.
You can do that.
Ms. Tressler, come on up. We'll get started.
solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
State your name for the court, please, ma'am.
Brittany Leanne Tressler?
And you're the mother of Elena Grace Tressler?
Yes.
And the father is Robert Allen Gervin, correct?
Yes.
And you guys are in the middle of an establishment of paternity action here in this court, correct?
Correct.
Now, you know why you're here today, correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain to the court what made you get concerned that on January 27th of 2024, what made you get concerned enough to make the phone calls that you did?
Yes. So Elena was at her father's for the weekend for his visitation time. She has her own little cell phone. It does not have cell service, but it has Wi-Fi capability. Along with this phone, it has an app on it called Facebook Messenger Kids. I control everything on who she can talk to, who she cannot talk to, things like that. And she has access to be able to communicate with her father. All messages, anything like that, through her phone will notify my cell phone and come through my cell phone as well. I was currently at dinner and a message came across that was a little concerning between Elena and her father, stating that I guess Elena had FaceTimed him. I'm not sure what was in that conversation in the FaceTime, but the text message that came across was stating he will have to wait until I'm done dashing, which kind of concerned me. So I FaceTimed my daughter just to try to see how her night was going. And that is when I was made aware of the fact that she was in the apartment without her father, and she was in the custody of her uncle, who she is not to be around.
Good. And did you telephone the authorities?
Yes, sir, I did.
And you asked for a welfare check, correct?
Yes, sir.
So at the end of the afternoon there, did you get a call from them to go get Elena?
Yes, sir.
And when you arrived at Mr. Robert Gervin's apartment, what did you observe? What did you do first when you got there? From start to finish, what happened?
When me and my boyfriend arrived at the apartment, we went up the stairs. We knocked on the door. We walked through the door. Immediately when we walked through the door, Officer Moss met us and was like, I will speak to y'all outside. We were ushered back outside into the breezeway. From then, Officer Moss, communicated with us, took my ID, talked to us about the state of the apartment and his concerns.
Judge, I'm going to object to hearsay.
Again, the 80325 type exception, and he's already testified too about what he did.
At this point, I'm going to overrule the objection. I'm admitting it not to prove the truth of the matter asserted, but rather to show what steps she had taken that evening. And it'll be limited for that purpose.
Go ahead and finish your answer.
We were speaking with Officer Moss. He was explaining to us to the concern that he had of the state of the apartment, and that he believed that it would be best that we take Elena home with us that night.
Okay. And in fact, is that what you did?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And since then, and sitting in here today, you've had an opportunity to see the photographs of Mr. Robert Gervin's apartment, correct?
Correct.
And a little history here with Mr. Robert Gervin. Obviously, you've had a child together.
Mm-hmm.
Have you lived with him at some point?
We have, yes.
And for what length of time?
Probably about a year, fully living together.
Okay. Do you, or how do you find, the apartment, the photographs that you saw, and the testimony you've heard today in relation to, what it was when you lived with him?
Judge, I'm going to object to relevance. I'm not sure what this has to do with the restraining order.
It goes to show, and I can call her back, I guess it's a rebuttal, but, he's already attempted to show some photographs of we're all better now with the house and the cleanliness of it. And I'm offering this to show that, this is kind of a pattern with Mr. Gervin, and she definitely has the ability to testify to that, having lived with him.
Well, at this point, we haven't seen those photographs because you objected to them. So I'll have to sustain his objection. It's not relevant at this point. It becomes relevant if and when those photographs are introduced and that Mr. Gervin were to testify as to changes he's made in the conditions.
Okay, thank you, Judge. Has Elena expressed to you things, again, regarding neglect of her over at the apartment that caused you concern?
I wouldn't necessarily say neglect. There has been occasions that she has came home, and just in talking with my daughter, her hair may be tangly, and I'll ask, well, did you brush your hair while you were with your daddy? And there was times that, well, I don't have a hairbrush at daddy's. Or, her breath might be kind of stinky. And so I'll be like, well, did you brush your teeth at your daddy's? And her response would be, well, I
Judge,
don't have a toothbrush.
Judge, I'm going to object to hearsay. I don't think this witness can testify as to the statements made by the child.
I think this is not rising to the level of abuse, so I sustain the objection.
So let's talk about John Gervin. And you're made aware that John Gervin was left alone with Elena that day.
Yes, sir.
So from your, again, living with Robert Gervin and understanding his brother and the things that Robert Gervin has told you about his brother, why is it concerning to you that Elena was at that point around John Gervin?
Being in a relationship with Robert in the past, there was always concern with the brother being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and having some mental problems. Even back when we were a couple, that was always, in question, and it was
Judge,
brought
I'm gonna
into
enter
question
another-
again.
Judge, I'm going to object. My objection on this is going to be twofold. I'm not really sure why any of this testimony about the uncle is relevant. It's my understanding that today's hearing is solely on the restraining order, not about the reasons behind why there's a no contact and why contact with the child is concerning. I get that that's a fine line, but I don't think that that's relevant for purposes of today's prelim.
Well,
on
part
this
of the reason
temporary
the
injunction.
restraining order was issued was because there was an allegation. There's a court order that was entered in this case, and I realize you're filling in, but the order was entered on March 16th from a March 2nd hearing. A specific provision of that order is, it is further ordered, judged, and decreed that the minor child shall have absolutely no contact with John Gervin, the brother of the father. That was signed off on by J. Reese Hawley and B. Davis Barnhill, and that was signed by this court, by me. There was a motion to remove the no contact order, and that has never been heard. And then there was a motion for contempt and for sanctions filed by Mr. Hawley for non-payment of child support, apparently. In any event, the motion for an emergency restraining order in this case cites specifically the violation of the order by the child being left alone in the custody of John Gervin. It's in paragraph 4 of the motion for emergency temporary restraining order. Paragraph 4 says, on the 16th day of March 2023, the court entered an agreed order wherein the minor child is to have absolutely no contact with John Gervin, paternal uncle. And then it goes on to cite the fact that the child was found to be in possession of the paternal uncle with whom she is to have no contact. So it's very much a part of this proceeding, and therefore I overrule any objection.
Judge, may I be heard briefly on that issue?
Pardon?
May I be heard briefly on that issue? Well, I understand that part of the basis for the temporary restraining order was the fact that the child was found with the uncle. That's fine, but we're getting into testimony here about the uncle's mental condition, his diagnoses, and what he's being medicated for. I don't think that testimony specifically is relevant for this TRO hearing. I think that testimony is relevant for the contempt issue that I think Mr. Barnhill and Mr. Hawley have set at the end of this month. That's the basis of the objection.
Well, I'm overruling the objection nonetheless because it does lay a foundation for showing why it is important in this witness's mind that the court order be complied with. And that is the reason for, as I've stated, that was part of the basis for the court issuing the ex parte restraining order. And therefore I will overrule your objection, but I think she's established why she had concerns, so I think we can move on.
So, and just to reiterate a little bit, that March 16, 2023 order, you're aware that was an agreed order between you and Mr. Robert Gervin, correct?
Correct.
So as far as concerns around Elena with Mr. John Gervin, what has Robert Gervin told you specifically as to the reasons why, Elena should not be around John Gervin?
Robert has told me different times that, there is concerns with his brother's temper, whether his brother, is stably taking his medications and things like that. I've been told by Robert before that, he can't take care of himself. The brother cannot. And that, it's hard to be able, it's somehow fallen on him to not only take care of his daughter, but to, I guess, have to take care of his brother as well.
Good. And what, again, don't strike that. So was it concerning to you that Elena was around John Gervin at that point?
Yes.
When you saw the photographs that Officer Moss took and that we put into evidence, what concerns you about the photographs of Elena's room?
Not just the trash that was around, but it brought up questions on how long has his brother actually still been around my daughter that I was not brought aware of. There was men's clothing strewn all over, the floor. The bed was not made, and it appears to look like a bunk bed, but only one bed is made. I can't, speak on what his rules are for our daughter when she is in his care, but with, at my house, she knows if she is not laying in her bed is to be made. That's how I know the room is clean and, she has done the chores that she is asked to do.
You concerned, you heard the testimony about today from Officer Moss that apparently, John Gervin was drinking a beer in the morning time. Mm-hmm. Based on his, and as you know, and Devoy testified to his mental condition, does that concern you that he's ingesting alcohol along with Elena?
That early in the morning, yes.
And you've contacted me, and we have filed this emergency temporary restraining order, correct?
Yes.
What are you asking the court to do today as far as the contact between Robert Gervin and Elena?
At the moment, I would like to keep it as it is. He is more than welcome to contact me or his daughter and see her at any time. If we do not have anything going on as far as a sporting event or things like that, he's more than welcome to come to her sporting events. He's more than welcome to contact me or his daughter and ask us to meet up for, a hangout at the park or at Burger King or, anywhere. But I feel like for the time being, it should be put in place that there, is visual proof that the brother is not around, and visible proof that, the apartment is completely cleaned up, in a better state for her to be able to stay with him.
And you talk about sporting events. Elena does track, correct?
I do track and field. She is basically the team's mascot. So.
At times, has he picked her up from school there when you're with Elena and things of that nature?
Yes, he is. He has came to Creekwood and picked her up from Creekwood while I'm holding practice.
How would you?
Or dropped her off as well.
As far as, were you ever made aware that DCS has contacted anybody in this case? You heard Officer Moss make a referral.
Officer Moss stated that he was going to put in the referral, but I have not been contacted by anyone from DCS stating that it has gone anywhere.
Have you been made aware as a parent that Elena's been contacted at all?
No.
Did they meet with her at school?
She informed me the next morning after the fact when we were walking to our classrooms, because I work in her school. We were walking through the office and she proceeded to tell me that she had been called to the office the day before and was spoken to by a lady.
And as far as the court, it's up to the court what to do in this situation, but as far as having some sort of cooperation that the apartment stays clean, what are you suggesting happen in that regard?
Whether it be me going to the apartment and physically knocking on the door and being able to step in, and I don't want to look through his personal belongings or anything like that. That's not my concern, but being able to walk inside the apartment, if I can see that it is physically clean, then I would be okay.
You heard Officer Moss testify that apparently there was only an old piece of pizza and Dr. Pepper that she had to work on all day. Does that cause you concern?
It does.
How so?
It does. I know when she's home with me, I mean, she could easily eat me out of house and home. She's constantly coming and asking for, Mom, can I have a snack? Or Mom, can I get a drink? Or Mom, will you make me this? I'm pretty sure the child would live on macaroni and cheese if I allowed her to. So
What would you say her hunger level is when she returns from Robert Gervin's home?
She typically, as soon as we walk in, she'll ask if she can go to the pantry and get a snack. That doesn't raise much concern. She is a growing 8-year-old who, like I said, would eat all day long if I allowed her to. So that doesn't, at the time it didn't concern me when she would come home and be like, Mom, can I have a snack? But after hearing Officer Moss and seeing pictures, it, kind of threw up some questions on how much did she actually eat while she was with her father.
That's all I have, Judge. Thank you.
You may cross-examine.
Mr. Essler, let me ask, you testified on direct just now with your lawyer about living arrangements with Mr. Gervin. How long ago did y'all live together?
That was back in 2020,
How long was it for?
a year. We were in that place for a year.
What sort of, what was Mr. Gervin's employment like during that 1 year?
I'm sorry.
What was Mr. Gervin's employment like during that year you were living together?
He worked for a company where he was gone for a few weeks and then he would be home for a week.
You say he'd be gone for a few weeks. Where typically would he go?
Wherever his work was at that point.
Like out of state?
Yes.
Okay. So during the year that you lived together, he was gone more often than he was there. Is that right?
Correct.
So if he's gone more often than he's there when you live together, if you have complaints about the house being messy, really wouldn't be entirely his fault, would it?
Well, I don't live with him now, so.
I'm not talking about right now. I'm talking about during the year period that you guys lived together.
Okay, well, the year period that we lived together, the house was never in a state like his apartment is.
Okay. You didn't testify on direct exam with a lawyer that he had a history of being messy?
Yes, there is a history, but he would never help me clean without being asked.
What would you describe as his messy then?
Things left out, containers left out, cans left out, clothes not put in laundry hampers.
Let me ask you, you testified that you wanted visual proof that the house is clean and that you wanted visual proof that the brother's not there. What sort of visual proof do you need that I guess John, I think is his name, that John's not there?
Well, I would just need to know that, he's, especially if she's, if he's not going to be in the apartment, then I would need to know that my daughter is not left with the brother. In our previous order that we are working on now, and that we are trying to come in agreement with, I clearly have tried to reason with Mr. Gervin in allowing Elena to be around his brother. But I don't agree with my daughter being around him unsupervised, given his history.
When you say him, you're talking about the brother.
Yes.
So you're not entirely opposed to the minor child being around the uncle?
No, sir.
Okay.
It just does not need to be unsupervised ever.
Give me 1 second, Judge. I think you testified, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you testified earlier that some of the concern you had was that specifically with your daughter's room, there were clothes on the floor and beds weren't made. Was that right?
Correct.
Isn't that normal for an 8-year-old child, though, to not want to make a bed, not want to do their chores and pick up their clothes? Isn't that kind of normal?
Yes. There is times that I have to stay on her, even at my house, that she needs to clean her room. But I can tell her, Elena, like, you need to go clean your room, or X, Y, and Z is going to happen, whether I'm taking away phone privilege or I'm not allowing her, to talk, go to a friend's house or anything. Like, she knows that it is expected of her at my house that her room is to be cleaned. And she is very good at, if I notice that her room is clean and I say, Elena, you need to go clean your room, she will go clean her room. But every morning before we go to school, she makes her bed.
Judge, I think that's all I've got from Ms. Tressler.
As far as her room goes, you think it's Elena's responsibility to clean up men's clothes that are in there?
No, sir, I do not.
To clean up trash bags, beer cans, all that's around?
No, sir, I do not.
Do you have to clean up trash bags and beer cans and men's clothes at your house?
No, sir.
You concerned that, again, as far as John Gervin goes, apparently he's drinking beer early in the morning, and they're all trying to raise money for dinner.
Yes.
Nothing further.
You've seen the pictures that were demonstrated at court, I think, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And I don't know if you can see them when I put them up there, but this is a photograph that was made in an exhibit that shows a shelf where food would normally be. Do you see any kind of food in that photograph?
It looks like a hot chocolate box and maybe a box of cereal.
And then you've seen what was on the, for example, what was on the shelf or on the countertops, which is a apparently empty pastaroni, some empty cans of corn, a melted thing of ice cream.
Yes, sir.
And there was another picture, I think, of this. But is that what you're talking about, your concerns regarding the food that's in the house and what Officer Moss testified about?
Yes.
Then Mr. Holly asked you questions about the condition of the room and whether, and I think you were asked on cross-examination, but are those pictures of clothing that belong to your daughter?
No, no, sir.
Is that a picture of any clothing do you see of your daughters in that picture?
No, sir.
Same picture from a different angle. Any pictures that you see of clothing of your daughter?
No, sir.
Well, whose clothing does that appear to be?
Men's clothing, whether they be her father's or the uncle's. I'm not
Anything
sure.
in this photograph, do you see any of an 8-year-old child's daughter's clothing in any of those pictures?
No, sir.
But you understand, is that the bedroom where your daughter was staying at her dad's?
Yes, sir.
Anything further from this witness? Thank you, ma'am. You may step down. Mr. Hawley, you may call your next witness.
Well, Kristen, I apologize for earlier.
You don't need to apologize. We have this problem routinely with people who are trying to Zoom in with us on the phone.
I swear or affirm to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Officer, will you say your name for the court?
Yes, Chris Lashley.
And you work for the Dixon County Sheriff's Department?
Yes, sir.
And what rank do you hold?
Sergeant,
How long have you worked into law enforcement?
14 years.
And in your 14 years of experience in law enforcement, have you had the opportunity to make calls out in the public for domestic-related issues?
Yes, sir.
And you had attempted on, or you did on the second day of February, have the opportunity to serve Robert Garvin, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And Sergeant Lashley, from start to finish, I'll give you the floor. Can you describe to the court what you witnessed and what you observed from the time that you went up to the apartment to the time that you left serving Mr. Robert Garvin?
When I first got there, the door was cracked. I tried several attempts that day, and it was in the evening, dark. The door was cracked open, knocked on the door. Finally, somebody answered the door. Mr. Gervin was on the back deck of the apartment.
And we have two Mr. Gervins here that were going back and forth between he and his brother. So would you be referring to Mr. Robert Gervin over here?
Yes, sir. The gentleman in the red shirt was on the back porch.
Okay, yes, sir. Go ahead.
So when I got there, finally, I guess it was his brother, answered the door, let me in. The house or the apartment was a wreck. It was a mess. I had seen the pictures that Officer Moss had taken, and to me, it looked worse. The smell was hard in there. Well, I made contact with him. He come in. I asked him, I was like, you got a spot where we can set the paperwork down, sign it. Yeah, he kind of raked everything off the counters. Here we go, right here. I said, all right.
Or can you explain it? Raked everything? Can you explain it a little bit? What happened when you raked everything off the counter?
The counters were covered with dirty dishes. It was a mess. Just literally, if it hit the floor, it hit the floor. If it moved to the back of the counter, it moved to the back of the counter.
Okay.
But he cleared the spot. We signed the papers, and walking out, I was kind of aggravated. I guess, I don't know if the gentleman's got a cat. There was a cat on the porch. Walking out there, ended up with cat feces all over the bottom of my boots. So it was an experience.
And did you pick that up at his apartment on the floor?
Yes, sir.
Just from walking through?
Yes.
The smell, can you, and not to belabor it, but the smell, can you describe what you were smelling when you walked in?
It smelled like old trash, like trash bags that hadn't been taken out. It's dirty. Dirty. That's the best way I could describe it.
So in your experience in law enforcement and dealing in domestic issues, would you have found on February 2nd, 2024, his apartment to be suitable for a child to live in?
No, sir.
If you had gotten a call on February 2nd, there was a child there, what would have been your response to that?
I would have got DCS involved and probably an emergency removal.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Cross-examine.
Sergeant Lashley, did you ask either of the Mr. Gervins about the cat?
I did not.
Okay. So you don't know if it was a pet or a stray or anything like that because you didn't have a conversation about it, right?
I did not.
Okay. I asked the first officer that testified the same question, this question I'm going to ask you. If on February 2nd, when you served Mr. Gervin, if there wasn't trash on the floors or trash on the counters or dirty dishes everywhere, if the apartment was clean, would you have had the same concerns?
Judge, again, I would object with the same objection I had last night. You know, there's
I think it's going to
self-speculation.
speak for itself, but I'm going to overrule it and let him answer the question.
That would be hard to answer because I don't know the gentleman. I was there to have him sign the papers. What I observed at the moment was unfit for a child.
Okay. But had you not observed that, you observed the spotless apartment, clean counters, clean floors,
Not knowing any situation going on, no.
you wouldn't have had the same concerns.
No.
That's all I've got, Judge.
Nothing further.
Sergeant Lashley, you may return to your duties.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you again. Mr. Holly, you may call your next witness.
That's our proof, Judge.
All right. The movement has vested their proof. You wish to offer any proof in rebuttal?
Yes, Judge. I'm going to call Mr. Gervin to the stand.
Mr. Gervin, if you'll come forward, please.
solemnly swear or affirm that
Mr. Gervin, can you state your full name for the record, please?
Yes, it is Robert Allen Gervin.
Mr. Gervin, I understand you have a daughter, is that right?
Yes, sir.
What's your daughter's name?
Elena Tressler,
How old is she?
8.
Okay. And can you tell the court what kind of parenting plan, what kind of parenting time you get with your daughter prior to this restraining order?
I get 2 days during the week and then every other weekend. I get, from 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock on the 2 days during the week. And then I usually pick her up lately it's been on Fridays from 3 and then I drop her off usually around 6 on Sunday. I'm supposed to have her till 7, but I always get there about around an hour early.
Okay. What sorts of things do you do with your daughter on your parenting time?
So I have short-term memory loss, so it's hard for me to remember what I do. Basically, we hang out at the house lately because I've been having trouble making money. And so that's all we've been doing, but usually we'd go fishing, we'd go to some wild refugees. I think that's what it's called, like camping sites kind of, but we don't go camping, we just go there and then we come home.
Forgive me for asking. This may just be because I'm filling in for Mr. Barnhill, but you said you have short-term memory issues. Is that because of the
Cancer.
tumor and cancers?
Yeah, they cut out the short term in my brain, so I do have short term memory loss. Long term, I can remember things from like 5 years ago, like as if it happened yesterday. But short term, my memory goes.
Is that something that, can that get better? Is it treated with medication or anything like that?
I take medication, but the medication I take every day is for seizures. It prevents seizures.
Are you taking those medications as prescribed?
Every day.
Up to date, current?
Mm-hmm.
Haven't had any issues with seizures lately?
No.
You testified that here lately you've been having trouble earning money or or trouble working, so you guys would hang out at the house. Are you currently employed as it stands today?
Yes.
Okay. Tell the court a little bit about that.
No, I got hired a week ago. Last Thursday, I got hired by a place called Midas. It's in Dixon, Tennessee. I had got my first paycheck today.
Okay. How much are you making at Midas?
$15 an hour.
And you just started, you said a week ago?
Yes.
What's your schedule like over there?
Right now, I'm working every day, usually about 10, 11, sometimes even 12 hours.
Okay. On average, about 40 hours a week, you would suspect, or more?
Right now, it's looking at 50 to 60 hours a week.
Okay. And do you get time and a half when you work overtime?
Yes. If I go past 40, yes.
Okay. Now, you've seen the pictures that have been shared with the court and entered into evidence. You've heard the testimony. Your troubles working and earning money, is that the reason why you were having trouble
Cleaning?
with groceries?
Yeah, same with groceries. Originally, I had gotten fired from Walmart for absences when I was trying to deal with my brother. So I ended up getting fired from Walmart, and then I figured I'll go to APSU, start school with my VA bill, and they would pay me. Problem is it was taking too long to get payment from the VA, so I had to quit school and then came back. So I started doing Instacart anyway to make money, and the day that the cops got called to my house was a day when I didn't have any money. But before all this, these past few months, I was making child support payments on time. My rent was being paid, my electric, all the bills were paid, and I still had a little bit left over. But right now, I went downhill. I don't have much right now, and I'm trying to work to get that back. I'm trying to work to pay everything off, and it's starting to go. But it'll take me a little bit more time to get fully up to where I can, and then hopefully go past that and start to reach my maximum capability.
So your testimony is that these issues were basically the product of a temporary hardship.
Exactly.
Okay. At any point when Elena was in your care, did you ever let her go hungry?
No. If she was hungry, I found a way.
Did you ever let her go thirsty?
No. If she was thirsty, I would scrape I would get quarters out of my box to buy her what she wanted. The things that she had was the things that she wanted, not just leftover stuff.
If it had ever gotten to a point where you couldn't scrape together and make it happen, would you have reached out to the mom for help?
I usually did, but they have problems too. My whole family has problems right now. It's very hard to get help.
Would you have ever reached out to Ms. Tressler for help?
Not with the way that she's been behaving. Meaning bringing up, I'm afraid to ask for help from the mother, because I'm afraid I'm going to be stuck in situations like I am today. Anything I ask for, I'm afraid it's going to be turned back around on me.
Let me ask you, if your child needed it, your child depended on it.
If there was no other option, I would.
No other option, would you put that aside and ask Ms. Tressler for help?
I would.
Did you ever have to ask Ms. Tressler for help?
No, it always comes at the last minute. I finally get some help.
You heard Officer Moss testify earlier that he gave you some advice on how to get your, I think as he put it, get your act together.
Yeah.
What steps have you taken to resolve some of these issues since that time?
Oh, I called. He gave me a number. It was 933. Don't ask me how I remember it. It's just in my head. But he gave me that number, and I called them. And I was put on hold for a while, so I ended the call. I'm running out of time, so I can't spend an hour on hold waiting to talk to somebody. I need help, and I can't get help from anybody. There's nobody that is willing to do anything to help me get out of this situation so that way I can go further. It's sad to me. I've applied to food stamps. I've applied to housing. Housing told me I'm a veteran. I got to go on the veterans list. The food stamps, they don't want to give me anything. I don't know why. I can't get anything from food stamps. I can't get anything from the veterans program. I can't get help anywhere. And I am trying my hardest to do everything I possibly can. And it's exhausting. It is flat out exhausting. I have my brother. I got to take care of him every now and again because sometimes he forgets his meds, and when he does, his brain goes wild. But he has never been a single harm to any child. We had medical reports on that. He is not a harm to a child, and when he thinks he's going to harm himself, he checks himself into a hospital.
Let's. I don't want to talk about your brother. I still wanted to focus on you. Is it your testimony that you still need the help you were searching for now that you're working at Midas? Or now that you're working at Midas, can you afford food?
I can. It'll take a week, but I'll have money to buy food. I'll fill my kitchen up in a week.
Okay. Did you go grocery shopping this morning?
No, my brother did.
Is it you got paid today, right?
I got paid today.
Okay. You gonna go grocery shopping today?
Yes. After I get out of here, I have to go grocery shopping.
You saw the pictures of the condition of your apartment.
Yes, and I felt disgusted by it.
Okay. You cleaned it?
Yes.
Okay. Officer Moss testified that he directed you to take pictures to show the court. Did you do so?
Yes.
Okay. Would you recognize some of those pictures if I show them to you right now?
Yes.
Second, Judge. Sir, do you recognize these pictures on this iPad?
Yes.
Okay.
A messy apartment.
This first photo, is this the photo you were given in the papers you served with?
Yes.
What's the second photo there show?
After I had cleaned.
What does it show specifically?
Just a coffee mug and this part of the stovetop, but nothing else.
Clean countertop, clean stove?
A clean countertop.
Recognize that picture?
Yes.
Okay. Is that the exact same picture as before?
Yes.
What is this picture here?
That is where we had a bunch of cardboard boxes piled up, and then I got rid of them all and I threw them away.
What do you recognize this to be?
That's the countertop. There's a center countertop in my kitchen. I cleaned that off. The floor I didn't get a chance to mop. That's why you see black spots on the floor.
Is this like a kitchen island, perhaps?
Yeah, like an island.
Is that the same kitchen island but with trash and groceries on it?
That is.
Okay, but that's now been cleaned.
It's been cleaned.
And
That's an empty cupboard. I need to fill that cupboard.
how do you plan to fill when you were shopping this afternoon?
Yes.
The paycheck you got today.
Yes.
And lastly, what is that picture show?
A cleaner stovetop. There are still those panels. I still need to scrub those panels. I was actually able to pull it all off, and I scrubbed underneath there. Those panels are hard to clean. Well, for me, they were.
Judge, at this time, because I'm just a fill-in attorney, I don't have paper copies of these. I'd like to enter these into evidence as late filed exhibits,
We'll let them be marked as a late filed exhibit.
just collective one.
Okay, number 3.
Yes.
Robert, what other steps have you taken to provide a cleaner environment for your daughter?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, there's photos of trash in bedrooms, or I think as Ms. Tressler testified to, there were clothes on the floor and beds not made. I mean,
Those rooms have been cleaned up a little bit, but I have been limited on my time working 10 to 12 hours a day. So I can only get like an hour to clean, and some of them were horrible and needed more time to be cleaned.
is it your plan to keep Your efforts going to clean the apartment for your daughter?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you were here earlier when the judge was asking Ms. Tressler some questions about the photos. I think the judge held the photos up and you could see them on the screen. The judge was talking about where some of the child's clothes are. Let's talk about that for a second. When your daughter's at your house, where are her clothes normally?
They're folded in her dresser.
Do they ever go into the closet?
No. All of her clothes, I don't have a lot of clothes for her, but the clothes that she does have at my house, they are usually folded up and put it into it. Or they're in a laundry hamper usually, but I don't have every day with her. So she doesn't have a lot of clothes, and the clothes that she does wear go back to her mom's.
So is it your testimony that the pictures the judge was referencing earlier, your child's clothes would have been neatly folded and placed in the dresser, and that's why they're not there?
Yes. She's a good girl. I don't have to yell at her. I don't have to punish her, nothing like that. She's a great kid. If I ask her to do something, she does it. She doesn't question. Well, even if she does questions, I can respond to her. I just talk to her, and she pretty much will do what I ask her to do. I'm not manipulating her, nothing like that. She's a good kid, and she's intelligent, very intelligent, smarter than I am. I never made straight A's, but she has straight A's right now. I usually, when she comes home, I read to her. Or I was before. Well, she's almost outread me. It's kind of weird.
Now, you heard some testimony from Ms. Tressler earlier, an argument from her lawyer about maybe you being a messy person, and that this isn't the first time your apartment would have looked like this.
Usually my apartment is pretty clean. I do sometimes fall off track and it gets messy, and then I fix it. I go clean for a while, then I fall off track, it gets messy, it goes back and forth. But for the most part, I try to do the best I can.
And that's normal, would you say?
It's normal. I think that happens with a lot of people. Sometimes you forget to throw your plate away, or sometimes you forget to wash the dishes because you've been working all day. You had something else going on that made you exhausted.
You heard Ms. Tressler testify earlier that she doesn't want to keep your child away from you, that you can see your child as often as you like. She just wants visual proof of some things. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I don't quite understand it.
How do you feel about Ms. Tressler's request that she be able to walk around your apartment to give approval on whether or not?
Oh, that would be fine with me if I can walk around her house. Because if we're going to have an even split, then if she's going to walk through my house, I believe I have the right to walk through hers.
Do you have any concerns as to her house?
No, not necessarily, not right now, but I'm not walking through her house. I go in every now and again, but even if the house is dirty, I'm not really one to report it. What I think to myself is maybe she needs help. Maybe she needs I got to hurry up and get the child support so that way she can have help. In some way I can relieve her of it, not punish her, not take the kid away. My kid loves her just as much as she loves me. I don't want to take that from her. I can have all the hateful feelings I want against her, but it doesn't matter because it's about what my child wants. That's what I'm concerned with.
Let me ask you, do you believe that's in your daughter's best interest that she not be allowed to see her dad on a regular basis?
No, I think she needs us both. Her mom can be the emotional love support that every kid needs. But when she gets older and has to face the real world, she'll need somebody that can push her to accomplish what she needs to accomplish, to be able to face anything. That comes from the father. The mother can support it a little bit, but at the end of it, it's the father who can get a child to do what they need to do.
What are you asking this court to do at the end of the day?
Well, for this hearing, drop the child order. It was a mistake. It won't happen again. I can say that I can get my brother away, but he also can support me too. We kind of need each other. But if the court says he can't be around my brother, then it's done. I'll send him somewhere else. He'll move somewhere else. I'll have to deal with it all by myself. But for this, I wish this would go away, and I want to get a trial date. So I want to settle this, but every order I get, it's always somewhat off. There's always something that's off.
Robert, I don't want to talk about your brother, and I don't want to talk about the no contact with your brother. I don't want to talk about the contempt actions, specifically as it pertains to this restraining order. Are you telling the court that this was a one-off situation? This isn't the normal?
Yeah,
This department looks like.
this is a one-off.
Okay. And you're asking the court to dissolve the restraining order and let you exercise parenting time with your child?
I would greatly appreciate that.
Judge, I think that's all I've got for Mr.
All right, Mr. Holly, you may cross-examine.
Mr. Gervin, you've seen the photographs that we put into evidence that Officer Moss took, correct?
Yes.
And with those photographs, you don't deny that was the look of your apartment at that time.
At that period of time, that was how my apartment looked.
You were living in it. You were living in there.
Yes.
You know that's what it was like.
Yes.
You've heard Officer Lashley, Sergeant Lashley testify that it's basically the same way that, to clean off a spot, you just basically had to sweep everything into the floor just to find a spot to sign some papers.
Yes.
That's accurate. That's the way it was.
Yes.
Where does the feces come in that was all over the floor that he was stepping into? Do you have a cat or a dog?
That wasn't feces. I don't have crap on my floor. If there was crap from his boot, it probably came from a stray cat that likes to spend his time outside. I don't have a cat. I don't have any animals.
So you can't explain. I mean, you heard Officer Lashley's testimony.
Yes.
And you can't explain that, or you won't explain it here today.
No, because it's not relevant. That I don't have any animal in my house. So if he's talking about feces on the ground, that's not in my house.
So you think all the trash and all the things that were going on were appropriate for Elena to be over there?
No.
What are we talking about as far as you heard Officer Moss testify that there was beer cans and cigarettes throughout the apartment, and that somebody was drinking, John had said he was drinking beer in the morning.
He did not drink a beer that whole day. Every time my daughter's around, we don't drink.
So Officer Moss isn't telling the truth, or John Gervin isn't telling the truth?
I can't tell who's telling the truth between Officer Moss or them. I wasn't there.
So John you heard Ms. Tressler testify that he has a diagnosis of like paranoid schizophrenia, and there's mental diagnosis with John. Is that accurate?
Are we here to talk about my brother, or are we here to talk about me?
We're talking about Elena.
Elena.
If you want me to answer the question, I very rarely ever do that. But you understand we're here to...
Mr. Gervin, you don't get to ask questions. Cross-examination, as unpleasant as it may be, you just listen to his question and then you answer it. If you need to make another point, your lawyer can stand back up and ask you the appropriate question, but you don't get to question the lawyer.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, and you understand we're here to talk about Elena, correct?
Yes.
You understand the court doesn't care about you, doesn't care about Mrs. Tressler, doesn't care about anybody else in the whole room other than Elena. You understand that?
Yes.
And that's what we're here to talk about. So with his diagnosis, it's paranoid schizophrenic, correct?
Schizoaffective is what I was
Judge, I'm going to
told.
object to relevance. I'm not sure what psychiatric condition of the brother is relevant. And Judge, with that
What we're talking
said,
about is a court order. There was a court order. I mean, I wrote down that he said if the court orders that she can't be around my brother, then he'll make sure she won't be around her brother. It's already been ordered.
It has.
And it was by an agreed order. His lawyer signed off on it. So it's already a court order. So I don't care what the reasons were so much as the fact that there was a court order down. He either obeyed that or he didn't. And the proof is pretty overwhelming that he didn't. So I have to sustain the objection. It's not relevant as to the reasons why, although there is a motion down to relieve that obligation or to relieve that restriction. That has not yet been heard. So right now we're operating under an order that specifically says that the child can't be around the brother, and that proof has been that he was.
But may I address court? The only reason for the question was so that you'll have some history as to why that came about, because that's not in the order,
I
so.
don't need any history. I've got a court order that's valid on its face, and all I need is to know whether or not it was or was not complied with.
Judge, may I?
The reason why it wasn't complied with might be relevant, but right now, that's the only issue. So,
Judge, may I briefly address the court as well? Not related to the objection. I have got some concerns on whether or not the court needs to hold a moment's hearing at this point. It's my understanding that there is a motion for contempt. I have not physically seen, but Mr. Barnhill has indicated that the motion is titled motion for civil contempt, but in the body of the motion, there is a request for criminal contempt remedies with a notice of rights. If there is a motion for criminal contempt, judge, pending, then the witness has rights, and I'm very concerned that we're floating a line here between his right against self-incrimination and
the
not.
civil contempt is what's being sought, but nonetheless, when we're at the noon hour, we'll take our lunch recess now, and then we'll come back, and over the lunch hour, you can confer with your client and let him know what his rights are, and then we'll come back and get started with that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Judge.
1:15.
All rise.
There's a notice.
All right, Mr. Garvin, you understand this restraining order we're asking for is really based on not just the cleanliness of your house, but there are other things. Talked about being around your brother, no food in the home, those types of things. You understand that as well?
Yes.
So is it common for you to not have any food in your home like that when Elena comes over?
No.
You know, you heard the officer say that there was discussion that all she had was a old crusty piece of pizza and a Dr. Pepper. Is that common or uncommon?
Uncommon.
Why was it common on this day when you happened to have the police call on you?
At that time, I didn't have the money I needed.
You said you were fired from Walmart. When were you fired from Walmart?
In December.
In December, you got fired from Walmart?
Yes.
Why did you get fired from Walmart?
Absences.
Why were you so absent?
Objection, Judge. Relevance.
Well, if, Judge, I'm trying to establish, why he didn't have any food in the home. If the court wants me to delve into that, I will. If you don't, I'll move on. But I don't know why.
That's up to him. If he wants to explain why there's no food in the house, you can either answer the question or I'll draw my own conclusions.
As far as being, let go from Walmart, and you said it was absences. Why were you so absent? Do you understand the question?
I do in a way.
Well, you got fired for absences from Walmart in December. Why were you absent so many times that in their rush traffic where they're looking for people left and right? Why is it that you got fired from there from not showing up for work? Why were you that absent? What were the reasonings that you weren't there?
They work off a point system.
But I understand, but you didn't show up for days on end at work apparently, and that's why you got fired. Why were you not at work? Can you answer that question?
Not that I can remember.
You said there were bugs. The officer testified bugs were coming out of glasses and there were, insects running around in your apartment. You familiar with that?
That's due to the apartment itself. There's bugs in everybody's apartment. They've been sending pest control people out.
Why were there men's clothes in Elena's room?
Because Elena, she usually likes to sleep on the couch. So I usually sleep in that room and my brother sleeps in the other room.
Your brother's living with you, correct?
I plead the fifth.
And just to stay on this line of questioning, your your brother was there with Elena on that day, correct?
I'll plead the fifth.
You testified you had short-term memory loss.
Yes.
You remember testifying to that? Have you had any sort of disability diagnosis because of this? And if so, what was it?
The only disability I was able to receive was from the doctor's office when I was just got out of cancer and I was still going back and forth to California to get my head scan.
Do you have any disabilities today that would prevent you from testifying accurately and honestly?
I don't think so.
Well, that's not a very comforting answer as far as me having to ask questions and the judge letting me ask questions. You don't think so, or you know so?
I can answer some questions. It depends on if I can remember.
Again, to your knowledge, do you have any disability that would prevent you from testifying truthfully and accurately today?
No.
And I know the order was done some time back, but just to be clear, at that time, this time, I mean, you understand that John Gervin was to have no contact with your daughter.
I plead the fifth.
You're working at Midas. You said you work every day. You talk about like every day of the week you're working?
They're closed on Sundays, so 6 days.
6 days, 10, 12 hours a day? Is that what you're testifying to?
Yes, when the order came down, if that order changes, my boss would let me go to pick up my daughter, and anything I have to do with my daughter, he'd let me off. He's a very, very nice guy.
Your brother still live with you?
I plead the fifth.
You said that you were trying to get help. You know, you testified to the court that Officer Moss had given you some numbers and things, and through the Veterans Administration and other places, you were trying to get help. And you testified that you tried to call, but you hung up because you were on hold for a while.
Yes.
You remember that?
Yes. I remember the tone it played.
When was that?
I think maybe 2 days after he had told me about it.
All right. At that time, you weren't working, correct?
No, I didn't have a job yet.
Okay. What did you have to do that was so important you could not wait to get help?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What did you do? What did you have to do that was so important that you couldn't wait on the phone line to try to get some help for yourself, as well as not to have this situation that we're in with your daughter?
I had to go work doing Instacart and DoorDash.
You go through the photographs, I think with your lawyer here, you testified there were still like black spots in your floor that you hadn't mopped your floor yet. You remember that?
Yes.
When's the last time you mopped your floor?
Yesterday.
Were those black spots, and before yesterday, when's the last time you mopped your floor? Let me ask that.
Before yesterday?
Well, yeah, you said you mopped it yesterday, and then before that, when was the last time you mopped your floor?
Yesterday.
Okay.
I can't remember the time before.
Those black spots in the floor, was that the fecal matter? Could that have been the
No.
fecal matter that everybody's talking about?
It's not feces.
I mean, you testified as well that this was the cleanliness of the home and those photographs and the things that we're looking at today, that it was kind of a back and forth thing, that for a period of time, you know, your house looked that way, then you would clean it up, and it would go back to that way, then you would clean it up. Is that what I'm hearing from you that you testified to?
Usually it's very clean.
Well, my question is, and I'm going by what you said, your terminology you used was back and forth. Do you remember that?
Yes.
When you say back and forth, are you talking about it goes from what we saw in the photographs to being clean, back to what we saw in the photographs to being clean? Is that what you mean by back and forth?
Yes.
So there are several times a year, depending on what time it is, that you're saying your apartment is clean, right?
Yes.
And there are times throughout the year, equal amounts of time, that your apartment is not clean and looks like those pictures. Correct?
Not exactly. As dirty as those pictures were, that was the worst it had ever gotten. Usually there might be 2 cups out or something like that. But I try to keep my apartment as clean as I can. But like I said before, these couple of months have been really difficult.
You talked about not wanting to report Mrs. Tressler like for a dirty home if she was to have one, that you didn't want to, you know, get anybody in trouble, that you didn't want these hateful feelings, is what I wrote down. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
Do you blame Mrs. Tressler for having an issue with the way your house looked when the police called her to come over there and get Elena because of all this?
Not necessarily.
Can I have a moment, Judge?
Right.
Does your brother work?
I plead the fifth.
So when Elena was there in the condition that that photograph, you know, showed today, how did she operate in the apartment? What was she doing?
She was playing on her phone. She usually watches YouTube on her phone, or she'll get on Messenger and she'll be on there playing Roblox with her friends.
She just walk around the piles of that stuff and
No,
is that anybody?
she usually just sits on the couch. Doesn't really walk around.
Nothing further.
Redirect.
Just briefly, Judge. Robert, you were just asked on cross-examination about your earlier testimony. You recall testifying when you first took the stand that your apartment, as it appeared in those pictures, was a one-off. Do you remember?
Yes.
Is it your testimony that your apartment has never looked that bad? That was it.
No, it has never been that bad before.
And the opposing counsel was questioning you on your testimony about going back and forth. Explain that. Maybe your apartment would get a little messy, some laundry needed to be done.
Yeah.
Some dishes needed to be done.
Yeah.
You clean it.
Mm-hmm.
A couple weeks later, maybe some more dishes, more laundry. A couple weeks later, maybe some more.
Yeah.
But never that bad.
No, it has never been that bad before.
And as it exists today, your apartment does not look like that.
No,
Is that right?
not nearly that.
Okay. Judge, I have nothing further.
Nothing further.
I know that you have some issues. Are you receiving a disability payment?
No, they stopped giving me disability about
Where was
a year and a half ago.
where was your disability from?
It was out of California.
Was it a state?
It was a state disability.
Okay, and you no longer live in California, so they stopped your disability. All right, but that's the only type of disability that you've had.
Mhm.
And then you are working now on 6 days a week, essentially, and making $15 an hour, if I understood correctly. All right.
Yes.
I want to explain to you so that I know your lawyers probably also talk with you about it. Invoking the Fifth Amendment is your right, but the Fifth Amendment is an amendment to the Constitution of the United States that says you have the right to not have to incriminate yourself in criminal conduct. You are charged with civil contempt, which is basically what your or what the mother of your child is saying, that you have violated a court order and that you should be punished civilly, which means I could put you in jail for 6 months until you bring yourself into compliance with the court's order. Criminal contempt is that for every time you violate a court order, I put you in jail for 10 days. And that's the reason.
I've told opposing counsel, it's criminal contempt for the contact with his brother, civil contempt for the child support. There's two contempts.
I'm referring to your motion that you filed, motion for contempt and sanctions. And it says you hereby move the court for an order holding the petitioner, Robert Allen Gervin, in civil contempt, and we show the following. That's filed January the 31st of 2024.
That's a misprint. I need to amend that. Number 8 on there says I'm asking for criminal contempt, 10 days and all that. So I'll have to revise that just to let the court know. I will be asking for criminal contempt on the contact part. I'm sorry, Judge.
That's all right. I'm going by the plain language of the introduction, and that's basically what it was. But so you understand, by taking the Fifth Amendment, you're simply saying my answers might incriminate me in some sort of criminal conduct. So you invoked your Fifth Amendment, and I have to draw whatever I draw from that right that you've exercised. But I understand you want to see your daughter, but do you understand my only concern is your safety and well-being of your daughter? If I can ensure that she's receiving proper care, then I want you to have that visitation. But if I cannot be assured of that, or if you're not in compliance with a court order, if you're not going to comply with a court order, then that's going to have other sanctions. What I want you to understand is that the court order is not something you can simply say, well, I'm not going to abide by it this time. If the mother of your child, if Ms. Tressler simply said, I don't like the fact that he's got court order visitation this weekend, so I'm just not going to let her go, you wouldn't like that very much, would you? And you would expect the court to enforce that order, wouldn't you? And that would be by a finding of contempt. So what I want you to understand is that my job is to ensure the safety and well-being of your daughter, and your job is to follow the court orders and put your child's best interest first, above your brother. I understand you want to try to help your brother, but you got to put your daughter above your brother. I've got brothers, but I don't put them ahead of my children. My children come first. So you have that relationship, and I know you feel put upon that you're having to help your brother, but it's the most important thing in your life ought to be the safety and well-being of your daughter. And when I see those pictures that I've seen, you can understand. You said it's a one-off, which I understand that's a term your lawyer has come up with for you, to say that was a one-time only thing. I'm not sure I agree with that because of the simple fact that Sergeant Lashley came in and testified that it was the same situation when he came to serve you with this restraining order. So you can understand I can only judge it by what I hear and what I see. All right, step down. You have any other witnesses?
No, Judge, that would be fine.
Any rebuttal proof?
No, sir.
Argue the case. I'll hear you in argument.
Real brief, Judge.
Is it brief by your terms or brief by my standards?
Would they be different? I don't know. That would be a question. Subjective.
It is subjective.
Judge, this apartment was neglectful. It just gives rise to that conduct. That is correct by opposing counsel when he brought that up. Ms. Tressler's really struggling with this for one reason. You heard her testify. Lana loves her dad. Lana wants to spend time with her dad. One of the reasons we've struggled in this case so much. But this is an ongoing thing, as she testified to. It's back and forth as he agreed with. And we're trying to figure out and hit a spot here where Elena's protected, yet Dad gets to see her, she gets to see her father. It's one of these things where what we would ask for is for the restraining order to continue, but work something out where maybe it's at the mother's discretion. There's been no question at all about her discretion at this hearing, and there wouldn't be if we had the final hearing. I can tell you she could work this out where they could.
What if you set the other motion for contempt?
Because of the TRO being set the way that it was, I didn't have under the rules of civil procedure time to hear it on today's date, and it's set on the 26th.
Of this month?
Yes, sir. So it's set on the 26th, and I'll amend that. That first paragraph definitely says civil contempt, but I would be asking for criminal on that. There's got to be a happy middle ground here, possibly where Ms. Tressler could be in charge of this thing and let her show you some good faith and move on through the 26th and the final hearing. And if we come in on 2026, I know this isn't his regular lawyer, so maybe we can set it for a final hearing, get this thing moved along a little bit, but let her have a chance to show you some good faith to say, hey, yeah, you can go see your dad. Let her have the ability to walk into the and like I said, not go through the drawers of everybody, but walk through the threshold of the door, maybe look, okay, fine, have a great visit. John Gervin can't be around whatsoever, and he's pled the fifth now to a lot of these questions regarding the safety of her being around him, and it's very concerning that the apartment looks this way with him living there, and that apparently he's drinking beer in the early morning hours, according to what the officer testified to, because he was thirsty. And with his situation, that does not need to happen whatsoever. What we do with that, I don't know. Ms. Tressler can use her own discretion as to whether he's there, I guess, or whatnot, but they could do public park for a little while, or, go to school or do some things like that. But there would be a significant problem with the brother. We need to find some reiteration that he's not going to be there. I don't think there's any question that he violated the order. He testified to it before we started pleading the fifth, that, the brother was there and around Elena on that day. And what they testified to with the officer, I think, really sums that up. And it goes a little further with the trust issue, of course, with Mr. Garver. You can't be trusted. There is an order down that says you cannot have contact with your brother. He knew that, and as the court pointed out, it was an agreed order. He agreed that his brother was in a position where he shouldn't be around, Elena at that time. And now here we are, and we all thought it was different. But when the police got called and they went in on a welfare check, we have learned otherwise. I'm asking for, this restraining order to continue. Let the visitation be at Ms. Tressler's basically discretion. And I can tell you, if you'll do that and get to the 26th and get to the final hearing, allow her to use good faith in letting them see each other, because as she testified
The
to.
26th is just your motion for contempt. It's not the final hearing, correct?
It was not. No, sir. We have not set the final hearing. It's just the contempt on the contact and the contempt for the child support. He's a little behind on the child support. I understand he's got some checks today, and he's going to give those up, and we'll take a look at those. But I think if you leave this up, basically the end argument to Ms. Tressler and the good faith of her being able to work out some visitation, I think you'll see that that'll work out. Maybe we'll get to the final hearing and be able to do some other things. Thank you for your time today.
Judge, I think it goes without saying, the least amount of drama we can interject into this case, the better off the child will be, the better off the parties will be. In my experience in these domestic cases, Judge, whenever one party has what I'll call all the power, or has the authority to walk through someone's house and says, no, there's a dirty coffee cup right there on the counter or in the sink. You need to wash that dish. That's not sufficient for me. So you don't get to exercise your parenting time. Having that authority invested in one party is wrought for abuse, and oftentimes is abused in these types of situations. The father would oppose vehemently the mom having that authority. Now, that's a different story if the court wants to order the father to provide her pictures of a clean house or a clean sink or a clean bedroom floor, whatever. I think that's sufficient. But having a party with the authority that can walk through someone's home and use her own subjective opinions to prohibit the father from exercising time with the kids, as both parties have testified, is in the best interest of the child anyways. The child being able to see mom, the child being able to see dad on a regular and consistent basis. Now, the pictures that you've seen, Judge, yeah, they speak for themselves. And the father has testified today that it's a one-off. His house has never looked that bad. But if you look at the written motion, Judge, the motion asks for the court to continue the restraining order until two conditions have been met. The motion specifically says that the restraining order they're requesting be continued until two things happen. One, the father is gainfully employed. Two, when the conditions of his apartment have been alleviated. You've seen pictures today, Judge. You've heard the testimony of my client that the apartment no longer looks as the way it does in those pictures that have been attached to the motion itself and entered into evidence as Exhibit 1 or Exhibit 2. That condition's been met. And you've also heard testimony from the father that the second condition's been met. He's now gainfully employed. He's employed here locally, making $15 an hour with Midas, working 6 days a week while he can't see his kid. Just got his first paycheck today. And plans on grocery shopping when he leaves court today so that he can put food in the fridge and food in the pantry for the benefit of this kid. Judge, I don't believe that there exists any continuing harm to this child in letting this child go to her dad's apartment. The apartment is in much better shape. Dad testified to that. Dad provided pictures of the same. The conditions with which the mom has requested the restraining order be kept in place, those conditions have been met. There is no continuing harm that would justify keeping the restraining order in place and prohibiting the father from exercising his parenting time. At the end of the day, Judge, I think everybody understands that you have to do what's best for the child. And I would submit to the court, Your Honor, that's what is best for this child, is that she is allowed to see her father on a regular basis, as she has been the last several years. It's my understanding this case has been pending since 2020 or 2021, and going down the road to a final hearing, but cutting off all contact with dad, all visitation with dad, when there's really no true continuing harm here, it doesn't serve the best interest of this child. Your Honor, we would ask that the court dissolve the order of, not the order of protection, but the restraining order that prohibits dad from doing so.
In such cases, the court's obligation is to balance the rights of the parents with the best interest of the minor child, which, as I've stated more than once, the best interest of the minor child is always paramount in the whole star, as our appellate courts like to refer to it, of any custody case, of any custody decision. Certainly it is this court's primary concern is the best interest of the child. So what I'm faced with is a suspension of the previous order of visitation and rendering to Ms. Tressler the right to govern allowing the child to see the father or not see the father as she sees it might be appropriate. I don't really get that from her testimony, that she's that insistent upon her being in control of it. I think she just wants her daughter to be safe. I think she wants her to see her father, and I don't think she wants her to just be safe. And I've already made a statement, and I'll make a finding that the conditions of the apartment, as shown in these pictures, and based on the testimony of not one but two officers on different days, the conditions of your apartment, Mr. Garvin, were unacceptable for a child of 8 years of age. They're actually unacceptable for a grown man or two grown men to live in that condition, but that was your choice. Problem is your daughter doesn't have that choice. If she wants to see her father, she has to come into whatever conditions you have. And that means I have to protect her. So the other option I have is to suspend completely the visitation based on a violation of the court's order regarding your brother. But it is this court's opinion that this hearing is limited today to the extension of the restraining order. I'm not going to extend the restraining order. Instead, I'm going to put a new order down regarding that will govern how Mr. Garvin sees his children, his child, his daughter. He has right now Wednesday and Thursday of each week after school for a couple of hours, correct? Wednesday and Friday?
Yes, sir.
And is that on every week or every other week? I thought I read that it was.
It's every week for the Wednesday and Friday, but if it's his weekend, he just keeps her till Sunday.
We're going to leave the Wednesday to Friday, but I want you to be able to, you coach, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes,
Are
sir.
you don't have to stand up, you can sit down. When you are coaching, what time do you get through at school? You're at Creekwood?
Well, I coach at the elementary school, but I coach track and field at Creekwood. So I leave Charlotte Elementary and go over to Creekwood. My practices are from 4 to 6.
Okay. So, and that's 5 days a week?
I typically try not to do Wednesdays, but I'm at the mercy of the weather. So sometimes I have to, cancel a Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday and pull up a Wednesday.
All right. Well, we're going to allow Mr. Gervin to have the Wednesday afternoon and Friday afternoon visitations. And second thing we're going to do is we're going to suspend the every other weekend visitation and instead replace it with every other Sunday from the morning until, let's say, 9 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay.
Mr. Gervin, what I want to give you the frequency similar to what you already have, but we're doing this to try to ensure that your daughter is properly cared for. This is conditioned on your brother having no contact with. I mean, he can be gone. There's no overnight visitation. He can go anywhere in the world and be gone while she's there if he still lives with you. Can't be around her. That is a court order. And when we come back on the motion for contempt, you're liable. You're probably going to be found guilty of violating it. But what I want you to do is to have the opportunity to provide a good home for your daughter, and not one that she's going to grow up remembering how trashy her dad lived and what kind of conditions. She loves you. She wants to be with you. And she's willing to step over piles of groceries, of trash, piles of clothes, and live in a house there with you with little or no food. And she's willing to overlook the bugs that are there, the ashtrays or the planter full of ashtrays and things. I will say this. Somebody in your house had enough money to smoke a whole lot of cigarettes and to drink some beer because that's what I see in these photographs. If you got the money to do that, but you don't have the money to provide a decent meal for your daughter, you are not much of a father. You understand that? You have looked after your own needs and your addictions more than you have provided a decent place for your daughter to see her father. And she wants to be with you. And that's really the only reason I think that I am inclined to continue the frequency of these visits is because I know she wants to be with you. But if I find out when we come back on the 26th that you have violated this court's order one time, and I don't mean, I'm not going to listen to any excuses about Fifth Amendment violation, Fifth Amendment rights, and you're not going to testify. If the proof is to me that you have violated this court's order again, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to enforce it. That means that you may go to jail. Civil contempt is I put you in jail for 6 months until you comply with the court's order. I can't do it but 6 months, but I can do it twice a year. You understand what that is? And I've put men in jail for not paying child support. You might want to think about that because somebody who comes before me that doesn't pay their child support is, again, a situation where it's a court order, and if you're not in compliance with a court order, then I have no sympathy for you. I mean, I understand you've had a rough way to go and you've had some problems, and I'm trying to help you. And if you need to get help from whatever source, then you need to follow up on that. You can't just give up because you stayed on the phone for a long time. If that were the case, there are a lot of things I would have given up on when I get put on hold. I hate being put on hold, especially when they play that music that gets in your ear and you have to sit there and listen to it. Talk about a psychological torture. That's pretty much it. But the fact is that's the only way sometimes you can do it. You got to persevere. So what I'm telling you is this. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt that this situation has been cleaned up at your house. But I want, for the first time on Sunday, Ms. Tressler will deliver your daughter to your door. You will open the door for her. She will stand outside the door. She will look inside the apartment. And if it's clean and orderly, your daughter will go right in. She's not going to know what you're doing. Don't talk to your daughter about, hey, if it's not clean, you're not going into your dad. I got to take a look at it. Just say, I wanted to help you go see your dad, so I'm delivering you. Then you take a look at it. And if it's not in good shape, if it's stuff like this in these pictures, and you just get your daughter and go home. And then you tell your lawyer, and then we'll have Mr. Gervin address with that. The point of that is not to allow her to control your life. It is for her to verify the concerns that both she and I have about the conditions in your home. Men aren't always good housekeepers. I'm not the best housekeeper in the world either, but I believe I could do a better job than that, no matter what the situation is, especially if you're not working. If you got a brother that's trashing up your place, kick him out. Get him to go find his own place. I'm letting you live there with your brother if that's what has to happen, but I'm not letting you have overnight visitation because I have no confidence that you'll kick your brother out overnight. But he can be gone during the day. And I want you to understand, if he's around this child, I don't care whether it was fair or unfair that that agreement was made. It is a court order, and that court order will be followed, or there will be sanctions that will be imposed. Do you understand that? And the 26th of this month is when I have to determine what, if any, sanctions are going to be applied to you. I don't like putting people in jail for these kinds of things, but I have done it more times than I can count, and I will do it to you if you violate this order again. You understand that?
Yes.
All right. Then I will make that the order of the court. All the other issues are reserved for the 26th for the hearing on contempt. He will have the right to pick the child up from school as he's done in the past, if he's able to do so with your work. Part of the reason I'm doing this is so you can work those 6 days that you've been talking about, and Sunday you're off anyway. So you can try to use that to catch up some of these child support payments that you may have been missing. Come into court on the 26th and you're current, guess what? It's not likely that you're going to go to jail. Come here on the 26th and you've been working $15 an hour for all of these hours and you haven't paid any child support, guess what? You're going to go to jail. So I just want you to understand the significance of what I've done today. Do you understand that, Mr. Gervin? I know you have a problem with a short-term memory, but I'm concerned about the conditions in your house. And if I need to send someone else over there to take a look at it, then I'll do that. All right. DCS has never responded to any of this allegation, correct?
Understood. They may have talked to the young Elena at school, but as far as Ms. Tressler goes, she's not had any actual contact. So I don't know what they're doing.
And I say DCS is Child Protective Services now, I guess. Child Protective Services is, supposed to be following up on this, and I imagine there may be somebody that will just show up at your door one day, see and walk in your house whether you want them to or not, to see what the conditions are. But you better make sure you keep it clean and neat. It doesn't have to be spotless, but it better not be in the condition it's in this time. Anything before then, we adjourn.
No, sir. I'll draft the order and send it around.
He's got about $1,200 in checks here and money orders for child support.
Well,
If it's okay.
I'm not a collection agency. Mr. Hawley can help you with that. So.
Judge, I just want to pass these over to opposing counsel in the presence of the court. So if there's any issues, come time for the civil contempt on child support issue with Mr. Barnhill, everybody can be on the
I
same.
don't know where you've checked to try to get yourself some help, but there are agencies out there that can help you. And, if you need any, you might want to, for example, the Help Center here in Dixon is one of the greatest institutions that we have in our county. I've gone there to buy stuff for myself, but you can go there and you can find what you need and you can get assistance from them at the Help Center. And that would be something I would suggest to you if you start running short of groceries or things like that. So there are a lot of churches that will do that. So just don't give up because you get frustrated. You got to go out there and try to do it. What I want more than anything is for the two of you, Ms. Tressler and Mr. Gervin, to put your child's best interest first and set aside any kind of animosity or anger you've had towards one another, and start thinking about how this affects your daughter. How does it affect your daughter that the police had to come to your house and have her removed from your house because of the conditions that you said were not acceptable? You told me that today. Think about how she feels about that. That's a memory that she's now going to have for the rest of her life. And if you two can get along, then she can have a good life and she'll love both of her parents and have a good relationship with both. If you don't get along, if you get resentful towards her because she's trying to protect her daughter, or if Ms. Tressler gets resentful and tries to control the situation and harm you, keep you from seeing your daughter, if y'all have a lot of anger and animosity, then your daughter's life is going to be ruined, and every major event in her life will be a calamitous emotional trauma. whether it's a graduation from school, Christmas, any other kinds of holiday visitation, graduation from high school, graduation from college, marriage. You know, I'd assume you'd like to be at your daughter's wedding and have a peaceful and harmonious and joyful occasion for everybody. You can do it if you two will get along. You also have to think about, from my standpoint, grandchildren. At some point, you're still young, but eventually you might have grandchildren. And if you do, the best thing you can do is to get along well enough so that you can both be involved in your grandchildren's lives and they can have a good relationship with you. My daughter's about to give birth to my 7th grandchild here in a little bit, and hopefully it all goes well, but I plan to be there for that. If there's any way in heaven or earth that I can be there. And I want to make sure that you understand that that's the kind of thing you can look forward to if both of you get along, okay? All right, I think you're both good people. I think you've had a rough way to go, and I think Ms. Tressler is a good mother who wants to protect her daughter. So let's try to make sure that this doesn't happen again, okay? All right, that's the judgment of the court. We stand adjourned.